Welcome, everybody. I got so overwhelmed by the song. It took me a moment to find that mute button. Hi, my name is Yodit Mesvin Johnson, and I'm on the team here at NEW, and I'm delighted to welcome you to Centering Justice, a conversation that centers the voices of beautiful melanated folk as we strive as an organization and a community to center their voices and our visions for transformation and change. And it is customary that I typically would begin this opening with a little bit about centering justice. But I have to be honest and tell you, I cannot begin this session without acknowledging the horrific massacre that occurred in Buffalo. And I'm going to ask if you would to just take a meditative moment as I share my screen and the names of those that we lost and a little bit about them. I'm gonna break with program a bit in honor of these beautiful souls who were tragically lost, and I'll bring and evoke their spirits in this space with us. I want us to see their faces, and so you are looking at, give me a second here, folks. You are looking at Celestine Cheney, who was 65 years old and went to the Tops grocery store to buy some strawberries to make a shortcake. Celestine was a single mother and a breast cancer survivor. And Roberta Drury had moved back to Buffalo to help her brother recover from a bone marrow transplant. She was the baby among the group at 32 years old. And Pearlie Young was 77 and had ran a food pantry in the neighborhood there in Buffalo for 25 years. She fed people every Saturday. Her niece said about her that she was an individual that just poured out of herself and of her substance, you know, just to help anybody. She was full of love. And Deacon Hayward Tenney Patterson was 67 and would frequently give people rides to and from the market, and was helping somebody load groceries that day when he was cut down. Catherine Massey, who was 72 beautiful years old, a civil rights advocate who had called for stricter gun regulations. She spent her spare time picking up trash and donating supplies to local schools. And Ruth Whitfield, mother of a retired Buffalo fire commissioner, was a primary caretaker for the love of her life, her beloved husband, and was coming home from visiting him at the nursing home when she stopped at Tops and was killed. Retired police officer Aaron Salter Jr. was 55 years old and had worked on the force for 30 years. And in his retirement as a security guard, Aaron saved lives that day, firing multiple shots at the shooter, but they bounced off of the shooter's tactical gear. And Andre McNeil, he was there getting his 3-year-old son a birthday cake. Geraldine Talley, who was 62, actually worked at Tops, a sweet, sweet person who never met a stranger, her niece said. She was shopping, and here this man comes out of his neighborhood to attack because of her skin color, because of her zip code, you know, because it was predominantly Black, they said. And Marcus Morrison was always positive and smiling and was at the bus stop outside of Tops on his way home from shopping. His cousin said he was a good guy. We're gonna miss him. And his brother asked somebody, why did this happen? You didn't deserve what happened because of this racist. When we launched Centering Justice in 2020, I was finding my voice as a new leader, y'all. Finding the courage to name what I knew was true, that I have a job because of human suffering. That what was true is, in the entirety of my life, when I have gotten free, it has been because of folks of color. Finding my voice, even when it crackles, to name racism and other forms of oppression as root causes for why this sector even exists. And it has been in Centering Justice that I have found love, that I have seen the faces of God, that I have experienced personal transformation, and where I have seen others, including some of you in this space today, be transformed. And so I'm so delighted that my colleague and friend, Hamida, had the vision for today's dialogue. And although our hearts might be heavy, and maybe you're even a little chilly from this Michigan weather, here we are gathered, finding our voices. Hamida, would you bring us into space and to what inspired today's session for you?
I would love to, and thank you, Yodit, for that grounding. We would be remiss if we did not acknowledge the massacre that many of us might be still processing, navigating through, and what it means to hold ourselves in love and tend to ourselves too. So for Centering Justice, we sort of had an organic arc throughout our time together. A few months ago, we started talking about just love and what just love with justice entails. And those speakers wended us down a beautiful path of talking about forgiveness and accountability, loving accountability, which brought us to a place of how do we repair relationships? And so that was our next Centering Justice, where we really spent some time thinking about the art of repair and how to heal both ourselves and the folks that we are in community with. So how do we think about or brainstorm how to repair relationships or think through tricky situations, which brought us to building our counsels, which we talked about last month. And really, what does it mean to lean on your trusted and beloved circles when you have a sticky or thorny problem or a joyous decision and you're like, I need more than just me in this situation. And as I was reflecting on our own story arc of connecting with others and building relationships and seeking others' counsel, I wondered, so where are our voices within that? We're able to take in and synthesize, sometimes metabolize things and thoughts and notions and conversations, but how do we also hold on to our voice, our sense of knowing, our intuition inside of all of that? And so my hope for our time together, and you might also note that I did not open us. I am fortunate, lucky, excited, a little nervous to be one of the speakers today. But we're going to spend some time talking about finding our voices. How do we hold the important, significant relationships that are in our lives and the important, pivotal decisions that we make, and still see ourselves and show up for ourselves and be one of our biggest advocates. I also want to return it back to Yodit if there are any other things that are bubbling up as we were thinking about today.
Well, I'm excited for you all to kind of bring yourselves into space, but I will say that I'm delighted to kind of hold the container for the conversation that you and Kallista and Dawn will have. I'm getting to meet Dawn for the first time, but I'm already, Dawn, I was thinking about you and just already in love with you. And Kallista, such an affirming spirit. And when I think about, if I didn't say this, I want to say that sometimes when I'm speaking my truth, my voice will crackle a little bit, and what I know I have been able to count on over the years from you is always, I just feel seen by you. And I'm so glad that you're here to talk about what finding your voice and what that journey has meant for you. And I know it's going to bless people today. And Hamida, who I work with all the time, you have left such an indelible impression on me in so many ways in the year or since you've been on the team, but as a former fellow of Champions for Change. And you've taught me and helped me to heal the parts of myself that when I haven't been able to communicate a need or a boundary, the practices that you've taught and helped me to find have just really been powerful. So I'm excited for today and to help hold the space. And I want to get our beloved Carly, Carly, it's me and you today, babe. And Carly is having some technical issues, but you're here now. So if it works, come on in and let's get this party started. If you would welcome introductions, and then we can talk a little bit about the intent of today's dialogue.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're so excited to get to know the speakers and share what they have to say with y'all. So to get us started, we always invite our speakers to bring their whole selves into this conversation. So we'll just begin by asking each of you to share what communities and identities you're drawing upon as you enter today's conversation. And Hamida, just because you're the most familiar with centering justice, do you want to get us started and then maybe go to Kallista and then Dawn?
Happy to. Thanks, Carly. Although this side is a little different. So Hamida Bhagirathy, pronouns she, her, hers. When I think about the social identities or identities and communities I bring in, I think the first identity as a woman. I think about how my gender has influenced the way that I have been able to find and also vocalize my voice. So over the years, my voice has been louder, softer, more bassy. It's shifted over time, but I realize that that is one of the identities I hold near and dear. I'm also a first generation Indo-Caribbean immigrant from Trinidad, and my parents were Hindu and Muslim. Yes, they set the path for contrast and rebel in me. And I think about within that time and space how some of those religious and cultural contexts also surfaced and interplayed with gender for me in terms of what presence is invited or acceptable or wanted. And in some ways, I think about finding my voice and amplifying it has been a little subversive over the years. I affectionately call myself a bad Indian woman, not that there's a good Indian woman archetype, but there are a lot of norms that I haven't, or I've shifted away from over time. And the last identity I really think about is socioeconomic class. I grew up very working class. I grew up in Jamaica, Queens, and being a first-gen immigrant, it was just a lot of transition. And over the years, I've had a lot of fortune and hard work and privilege that led me to some incredible schools. And I'm a University of Michigan alum. And I think about how that gives me a view into a couple of different worlds. And I sort of live betwixt and between multiple identities. And my voice has different flavors as a result and perspective taking. So that's a few of the things that I'm holding as I enter the space.
Thank you, Hamida. So I'm Dawn Richberg, and I come from a working middle-class family from Philly. My dad went into the military when I was about 5, so I traveled around. Though I would never myself serve in the military, I'm a proud military brat. And have met many people and formed many connections and friendships and relationships based on that. In the words of Audre Lorde, I am a Black lesbian mother, warrior, poet. I am also a playwright. I just completed my MFA in playwriting at Western and came back to Ann Arbor a couple weeks ago. So it's nice to be back. as a playwright, I like to use the page and the stage to tell stories about the diversity of experiences of Black people in particular. I live here in Ann Arbor, and I always introduce myself when people say, introduce yourself. I always say, well, I live in Ann Arbor, but I am not of Ann Arbor. And I have lived here for over 30 years, and I feel like I have worked to help transform the culture and the institutions of Ann Arbor as an activist, as an educator, as a professional. And actually, I see one of my comrades here. Aaron used to work with me when I was at the American Friends Service Committee. I was the program associate for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender program, and Aaron was on our program committee. So anyway, so I show up in a space, all of me, all of my identities, fully integrated. And so it's great to be in a space here where, I don't even have to make that decision to do that. I just know this is that space. So thank you for having me.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kallista Marie Walker, and I am an Ypsilantian through and through, born and raised, graduated from Ypsilanti Community Schools, which is where I work currently. I am a very proud, emotional mother of 2 adult Black sons. I know they hate that I'm so emotional, but I am. And I am the daughter of Topaz Taharja. I feel moved to say her name, who was very pro-Black and transitioned in 2019. The great-granddaughter of UD Sugared Bryant, who was a woman of faith and raised all her grandkids to go to church and go to Sunday school and vacation Bible school. And, I have such a mixture in my soul being raised by such amazing women. And then coming from the family that I come from, my aunt Aquila Robinson, who works for the University of Michigan. They've all had such an influence on the woman that I am and the woman that I'm evolving into. And it just feels so good to be here. And I just have to share that, Yo Deep, last night what you said, when I tell you, it has not left my mind, and it is even helping my voice to emerge even since last night. And so I'm realizing that finding your voice, it never stops. Like Hamida said, sometimes my voice is soft, sometimes it's louder. And I'm realizing that that's not always easy for Kallista Marie to embrace. But I'm so honored and grateful to be in this space because it inspires me and gives me a safe space to do just that.
Get me all emotional. Feeling the feels. Thank you for naming your mother and your grandmothers and bringing them here too. Yeah, part of how we were conceiving of today, one of the liberatory practices that I really cling to is visioning or futuring, right? Is like teleporting a thought or idea or even myself into like the future I long for. And I realized that is privileged. Like I wasn't always able to do that. And as an activist and organizer, I can, more times than not, I can tell you what I don't want than what I do want, right? And so this finding your voice is also, in my mind, a liberatory practice. And whether that's an internal voice where we're processing, right, what's happening and changing the way we think about ourselves and others, or it's a platform like this where we're using our voice to take up space. That's what I hope you will do today and what I hope you will inspire others to do, that within those intersecting identities that you all mentioned and that we hold, there is a human who deserves to take up space. And the description, for today's session is about how taking up that space, right? Having that agency can empower and catalyze our healing. And that is what we believe, is that we are all healing from the harmful impacts of all kinds of oppression, right? And we've all experienced it in some way or another, regardless of these constructed identities that have been placed on us. But some of us have felt those more acutely, right? Especially Black, Indigenous, other melanated folks. While we kind of search for what's true about ourselves as opposed to what the world has said, right? What the world has told us, really, how do we tune out fear and other distractions and lift up the vibrations of our voices and explore that? And so I think that's kind of where I wanted to open up your conversation. And that's what I want it to be. That's what I hope it'll be. Just as a practice of finding our voices, is just speak, speak what's on your heart today. But when you think about, and Kallista, I'm gonna come back your way if you don't mind. And thank you for taking time away from our children. You're a paraeducator in Ypsilanti schools, the school you grew up in. But I know what it meant to have to take a day off to be with us, or to take some hours off. And if I didn't love you already, I love you so much more for that sacrifices. But when you think about finding your voice, what does that look like for you? What's that feel like? What's it taste like? What's it like? And I would offer that same question to inspire your dialogue today, Hamida and Dawn.
So there's an art exhibit, right? Embracing diversity. They have erected large versions of small art that was done locally, outside the country, in different states. And Lynn Settles reached out to me, and some of our young people at Erickson actually have an art piece at Park Ridge. So yesterday I went and I looked at them, and I'm a quote lover, right? I am obsessed with quotes. And so each art piece has a quote. And there was quite a few quotes that really stuck out to me yesterday after our meeting. And one of them was, it said something like, open your eyes and open your ears, because you never know whose story might change you, right? And as I sat there looking at that quote, and I just thought about how often interacting with other people impact me. And I'm on social media a lot because I love information, I love learning. But I realized that with all the information that I take in, the importance of just sometimes just sitting still and checking in with me to see, how do I really feel in my body about what I've taken in? And that's not always something that I've been able to do, or even realize how important it was to do. However, in the last year or so, I've done it more. And what I can tell you is that it has made me realize how many things Kallista has to unlearn so that her heart can be open to learn and accept what my voice stands for. Man, when I said that, what my voice stands for.
Come on now.
And realizing that when I open my mouth and something moves me enough that I need to speak on it, I have to be firm with what I feel in my body is right for me. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to have all the correct vocabulary, because that's always very intimidating to me. Man, they talk like this, and they have this degree and they have that degree. That's not what God called me to. He called me to be. And that, literally saying that out loud, I'm trying, my voice is cracking, as you can hear, because that's my truth. And so it feels like peeling off layers is what it feels like.
Amen. Amen. Yeah. If I could piggyback off what Kallista just said about, going inward, looking inward. And, sometimes that's what we have to do, like go inward and sort of ask ourselves like, okay, well, where are you? What kind of world do you want to see? Right? What do you value? So just piggybacking on that, and the inward piece for me, the outer piece, just kind of adding to that, is I feel like as a writer, that has helped me also to find my voice. And I think we talk about, sometimes it's not a popular choice, and we have to, that Audre Lorde quote in terms of, even if you have to speak your truth, speak even though you may be afraid. And sometimes we have to make decisions that we know will help us to find our voice more, but maybe they're scary, decisions. So for me, 3 years ago, at the age of 56, it wasn't like I was 20, but I, when I decided to go back to get to focus on my writing, to get the MFA, not because of the degree per se, but just because of that experience and being in a community of writers like that, I had safety just being here, having a particular job or whatever. But, we have to sometimes make those choices that will help us to find our voice more and speak our voices. And, people say, oh my gosh, you were so brave, like in your 50s. And I say, like, I mean, I understand that, and I, appreciate it as a compliment, but I also feel like I wasn't brave. Like, I had to do that, right? I had to do it. So anyway.
Oh, Dawn, Kallista, I'm just taking all of what you shared in. So I'll offer my process for finding voice was really a combination of, internal introspection, but also a philosophical one, a spiritual one. And I started reading a book, which I cannot fully endorse. I didn't finish it. But it's called The Altar Within, A Radical Devotional Guide to Liberate the Divine Self by Juliet Diaz. And there's one quotation that I thought sort of summed up a little bit of really what I thought about this process. What if I told you that you will need nothing but the self to heal, to discover your truth, to master your power, and to start building the life you've always desired? What if you finally believe that you were created with all of the tools you need, flawless and sacred as fuck? And I think about what it means for us to proceed with knowing that we contain the things that we need. I also feel like I would be missing a part, to your point, Don, when you were talking about folks sharing that a movement is brave or an act is brave. I think about what risk there is sort of part of finding our voice, speaking, using our voice. And earlier in my life, I thought about the risk of what other people might think or how people might react. Sometimes quieting my voice was an act of survival. To ensure that I either was silent or didn't say something that would be provocative. But as I've gotten older, I think about what risk there is in betraying myself or not showing up for myself, or building relationships that aren't as depthful or really as meaningful. So for me, I think about risk in a whole different way than what it means to show up with my voice. I'll also offer that I think about my voice being my inner compass. So it is very intertwined with my values, and it's an inner sense of knowing for me. And I don't know if I'll have time, but I'm really curious to see like how it shows up for other people, because I've been realizing it shows up a little intuitively for me in terms of that just deep sense of knowing about something. And I may not be able to cite an author or an article or a film, but I just know. So that's how voice shows up for me.
can I just share something real quick?
Mhm.
Hamida, when when I listen to you, one thing that I think about a lot, and I actually have it written down in where I sleep. So I wake up, I see it every day. When I go to sleep, I see it every day. Is that I think what I would really like to put on wherever I'm laid to rest is I hope I left this world a little better than I found it.
Mm.
And when I when after we spoke yesterday and I was led to an article, and Yodi, I actually sent it to you. And the article, like almost every single word in the article resonated. But one of the things that she mentioned, which I knew I was supposed to read it because it was intuitive, right? To me, that, like you said, I was led to the article literally 15 minutes before I signed on this Zoom. And she talks about envisioning the world the way you would want it to be for you. What would you want it to be for those that you love? And checking in with yourself with love, right? And saying, how do I need to show up for me? And how do I need to show up for others? And sometimes I almost feel like I have to put a safety bubble around myself, which could equate to boundaries. And sometimes it's scary to put up boundaries when you've not had them up. So when you said that to me last night, it was a trigger. I ain't gonna lie. It was a trigger. I was like, why she all in my head? Why she all in my journal and stuff? But I think sometimes you have to put up a boundary because you have to protect you. And when you've been operating in a certain way for so long, like I said, I'm a recovering people pleaser. So you get afraid that people will not like you or that they'll be mad because you've decided to put up these boundaries. But the only way to know what you stand for and what your voice means and for it to be impactful is for you to go inward and protect what is developing. It's like a flower. It's literally developing. You don't want no frost to get on it too soon. You don't want too much heat to get on it too soon because it's blossoming, right? And so like that is my compass. I want to leave this world a little better than I found it. And that's what I want my voice and my presence and my energy to be used for. And how do I do that? Day in and day out, minute to minute, moment to moment. Especially looking at these little people that I get the joy and the challenge of loving and encouraging and empowering on a daily basis, and that their families entrust me and my team with that, right? I want to make sure that I'm being as healthy as possible so that I can be that for them. And I have to know what my values are so that I can use it wisely because I've been entrusted with this gift. So I just had to share that.
Kallista, you make me think that, Kallista also needs to be healthy for Kallista, right? And what you just said about boundaries, I think about, that fear of folks moving differently or responding differently once one has changed, that comes true. I will say in the last year and a half, I've had some relationships shift, fall away, with a cognizance that some folks appreciated, benefited from, felt really comfortable with a different Hamida, a Hamida that was more porous, a Hamida that didn't have such conviction in her voice. And while I mourn that, I might have been a little easier to get along with then, probably a lot easier. But I also think about what it means to, again, be present for myself, and that includes boundaries. I will not be able to quote this correctly. This is not my quotation, but I recall a quotation of someone that said, boundaries help me love you and help me love me. And I think about what distinction in space that makes to ensure that we're getting our needs met. Mm-hmm. And in finding voice and being clear about boundaries and expressing needs and wants. It's so powerful and gives folks a chance to show up for each other.
I'd like to share like a little story that, I was sharing a conversation I had with my niece. So I think as women, like we're even more socialized to be people pleasers than are others. And she was, sharing with me how, she gets really angry because people push her boundaries. She's trying to find her voice and find a place where she feels like good in herself in terms of taking care of herself and not just family and work and everything else. But she was talking about how then she will get mad, get angry, and kind of having, like an outburst. And then people will be like, oh, what's wrong with, so-and-so. And so I, just encouraged her to embrace this quote. And it's basically, it says like, your boundary doesn't always have to be like this angry electric fence, right, that shocks people when they touch it. You can start out and just have it be this consistent light around you that tells people like, I will be treated sacredly, right? And so you can,
Okay, pause.
it's out there somewhere, but it's basically, so I said like to her, like,
Wait, Dawn,
yes,
just for a second, honey,
yeah,
because that was a whole word.
oh,
Let's
okay,
okay, your
hold on,
boundary,
I can find it, hold on, let
your
me
boundary
last
doesn't have
statement.
to be like an electric fence. Your
Yep.
boundary can be like a light. Say the last part.
I just found it. So here it is. It says, your boundary need not always be, which not always. So sometimes it can be that electric fence. But your boundary need not always be an angry electric fence that shocks those who touch it. It can be a consistent light around you that announces, I will be treated sacredly.
Woo.
And so, I think that's, what she and I have had conversations about. That's what we're both trying to do, right? Is establish like how we will be treated. And that impacts how we can do the work that we want to do in the world to make this a place where like all of us cannot just like, we're all out here trying to survive. We want to thrive. So, I think establishing healthy boundaries is a part of that.
Dawn. Woo. Thank you. And I want to like, well, each of you has touched in your own way on either like explicitly or you've alluded to values that live up underneath your voice. And so I'm just sort of curious, like I want to bring those more explicitly into this space. And I really try, and people on Centering Justice have me talk about this a lot, like love is a core value of mine. It is politic, it's a way of being. And I really do try to move in love, try to speak in love. Not always, but I try to. I get my girlfriends laugh at me, y'all. They be like, "You the white woman whisperer," but really, it's just, it's not that. It's just that I think we can speak our truths and still be operating in love. And I know that for me, I really credit my mother with that, because I experienced love. I didn't have every need met, but I experienced love. And so it really is often at the root, like, how my mother talked to me, I knew I was loved, and so it's like, and again, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't a perfect relationship, but like, I felt that. And so it's a resonance in me. It's like a part of who I am. And it's become a way of being as well. Again, not always, but it's kind of like my baseline. Kallista, like, when you said, I want to leave the world better than how I found it, and that you wake up and go to bed to that every day, like what guiding principles are under like your voice, or what values do you hold dear that guide you finding your voice or using your voice?
I think one of the things is, so here at Erickson, we go by, there's like 7 principles that Principal Mickle, goes over regularly over the loudspeaker, right? And one of them is to seek first to understand before you seek to be understood, right? And I know a lot of times, because I'm an only child, y'all, I am through and through. And, Miss Lopez loved on me and she spoiled me until the day she took her last breath. And she disciplined me though too, because I got some whooping when I was young. We ain't gonna talk about that today. We gonna stay centered in joy, right? But so my mother was full of wisdom. And so she always told me, people want to be heard. It is so important for you to hear people. You have to tune in, you have to close your mouth and you have to listen. So I think that is the first thing, is to tune in and listen, because, and it's hard sometimes to sort of try and put your emotion to the side, because a lot of times we listen to react. And I know we've all seen the quote, listen to understand, don't listen to react. The quote sounds beautiful, but in our human body, we be like, but, and so I think that is definitely one of the guiding principles that I strive to do as much as possible. But I get excited easily, and I have a friend, and he's constantly telling me, just stay here. I just need you to stay here, right? But that I think is probably one of my big things, and I want people to feel loved, because I think love heals a multitude of wounds. It just heals a multitude of wounds. And I think when I've felt my safest is when I've felt loved, like all of me felt loved. I didn't feel like I had to hide pieces of me to make you comfortable. So I hope that answered that question.
Can I piggyback off Kallista again?
I'm done. Come on.
So you talked about love, and then you were talking, I think you said your husband tells you sometimes just to listen, not for like how you can respond, but just to hear that person. And it just reminded me of the work, and Aaron knows this well, the work we used to do at AFSC. And I think it is grounded in love, but the principle that we used to teach was LARA, L-A-R-A, and it's listen, affirm, respond, and then add. And so the listening piece, like a lot of times people want to jump in and say, they're listening to how they can combat, and like in our culture, we have we're socialized that way. We're socialized to win, and we're socialized to use our words as weapons. And believe me, I still am challenged with that one for sure. Especially when people are coming at me, like, but we have to like change that for us, change that sort of perspective or mentality for ourselves, and like listen, not to, like respond or zap the person, but like listen from a place of love. So, and especially, I think, especially, in these times where we're, sometimes we can be dealing with people who are just like, their values are way, way different from ours, and they maybe are, combative or whatever, it can be a challenge. But, so anyway, because you said that, I just wanted to piggyback, so.
No, I really appreciate that, Hamida. I'd love to hear about like what are the values that you find like as a common thread in your voice. And I'm also curious, y'all, just as like to please listen to Hamida, but think about this too, like what does your voice sound like? When do you know you're hearing it? So I'll come back to that.
So many thoughts. I'm probably going to touch on a portion of your question, Yodit. So I really think about how my values are really centered in my purpose. And I think about what I imagine, envision as my purpose is trying to foster a sense of belonging for folks. And when I think about that, I think that goes back to, for those of you who may not know dynamics between Muslim and Hindu communities, they're not besties. And as a result, I know very little bit of my extended family, and we're not connected because of that religious socio-political conflict that was manufactured by colonization. So to me, it's just wild that that is some things that people proceed with. But I think that that sense of a loss or not feeling as much belonging has informed my purpose into wanting to use that as my life purpose. And I often say to folks that in creating this belonging, I could do that in my current work. I could do that as an auto mechanic. I still have time to do that, so I might do that later on. But when I think about my values, I think about integrity. In terms of really what we all have in life, my opinion is that we have time and we have our words, or our word. And for me, it is important to value the people I connect with by aligning my words with what I do. Something that was touched on, love, compassion really flows into that. And what travels alongside with that is perspective taking from me. And I simultaneously believe we are all our universe and not the universe, right? In that, like, we all contribute a piece, but I don't know everything. I know Yodi, but I don't know Yodi. Yodi knows Yodi. I think about truth, and I think about truth both in its beautiful ways and its more complicated, emotion, tumult-inducing ways as well. And agency, something I often say, which has bitten me very hard, is that we all have agency, and so we all have the prerogative to change our minds. But it's true. And I've had folks change their minds in ways that was not my mind, and what it means to lovingly accept that that's how things are. So those are some of the values that show up for me.
Yuri, can I add something? You had mentioned something. You said, how do you know when you're speaking, when you're using your voice, right? And there's this book. So I'm a little obsessed with picture books, y'all. I'm just a little bit. So there's this picture book about indigenous culture, and it's called Stolen Words. And it's about a little girl who is probably in elementary school, and her grandfather picks her up from school every day. And she's asking him to teach her Cree, which is a language of the indigenous culture. And he speaks about how he went through, you know, how a lot of them did, where their whole culture was shut down and they were assimilated. They went through assimilation, right? And so in the book, it uses black crows to represent their language literally being stolen from them. And so when I think about what it feels like in my body when I speak my truth, it feels effortless, and it feels like birds taking flight. I love watching birds like fly over water. It feels like birds taking flight because literally I feel like something has stepped in and started speaking through me. I literally feel spirit speaking through me. And it rolls and it makes sense, because usually when Kallista is speaking, Kallista be all over the place, right? But when my true purpose, as Hamida said, when my true purpose is coming forth out of my mouth, it's effortless. And it's just like a bird has taken flight, and it's almost like I'm just on this roll until it's done. And then when it's done, it's almost like, okay, what just happened? And that's when I feel like I'm in sync the most with what the universe has called me to this space in my life for. And it's almost like like it doesn't even process what all was just exchanged between me and whoever I was talking to until later. And then I'm writing in my journal and just like all these lines, and then it feeds me all over again. That's how I know, wow, that was like a supernatural interaction. And that to me is how I think I can make this world a better place, because that to me is where impact happens.
Okay, I gotta interrupt to say this because a couple of times you said when we talked last night, and I just want the audience to know that we typically have this kind of discussion when we bring y'all together. And we've tried to really make sure that it's not like the conversation that we're supposed to have here, but we want to make connections between the speakers. Um, and wow, Kallista, you just said so much. That I think what I wanted to lift up in this moment, babe, is this is why when you said, I don't know why you asked me to be on this panel, this, or in this conversation, this is why. This is why. Yeah. I have another question, but Dawn, I want to ask you the question, but I also would love for you to tell me what, like, you're a writer, you know, an activist, an organizer, like, I'm curious about when both you and I think the three of you are writers too, which is interesting. But we're talking about voice. So I want to know like how you hear your voice. What's it sound like? I'm curious about that. I just had this like aha of, we call this finding your voice, which presumes you lost it. And so I'm sort of curious about that too. Like, what was the loss and what has been the regaining? I'm just saying, because y'all done opened up. I'm just, just carry on. Just a few things to talk about. Carry on, carry on.
Dawn, you got this, or?
Yeah, I got this, I think. So a couple of things come to mind from Yodit's question and comment there. One, I feel like one of the things that I do that's really important is I have a meditation practice, and that helps me to be centered and to like know sort of where I'm going. And I listen when I sit, so that's really helpful for me. In terms of as a writer, I feel like I see myself as really a medium. Like and this is in some ways it's related to the meditation. So it's like sitting and listening. I feel like as a writer, when I'm most sort of effective as a writer, I feel like is when I just sit and listen and don't feel like I'm like the driver. Like the characters come talk to me. They tell me what they need to say. And sometimes, and I mentioned earlier when we started in the introductions that like my writing centers like Black people. Like I like to write about the diversity of our experiences, people who are like me, other Black folks who are very unlike me, et cetera. I just love like writing about our experiences and sort of, holding them up as a gift to Black folks and other people who are open to those gifts. But I see myself as like a medium. I sit and listen for the voices that come, the ancestors that the goddess of my creativity gives to me. That's really important to me. So
Are you just gonna keep dropping them? We just dropped it just everywhere.
The goddess of your creativity, Dawn.
Goddess of my creativity.
Did
Yeah,
you hear that?
yeah.
So, Dee, when you asked that question, I thought about, I think since I was like 18, I would always make this clear distinction between what is the right answer or the acceptable answer or the advantageous answer and what was my real answer. And so for me, y'all, I have multiple inner narrators. Sometimes apparently they interact with each other. But my right voice used to be real loud. And over time, it's softened and my real voice has become more present. And I feel alignment when I'm in my truth in that way. And I will say it's not always easy because there are some controversial things that I feel and I say. But if I had to describe it as a feeling, the first thing that came to mind, and I'm not a jigsaw puzzle fan either, so I was sort of struck by this. It's like if you've been assembling a jigsaw puzzle and you put that last piece in and you hear it click and you feel that alignment and that rightness. And for me, that's what it feels to be in my truth. And to your point, it's not finding, it's just surfacing, speaking, amplifying my voice. And when you talked about like writing, and I think about my relationship with writing. I started out as I loved writing poetry in high school, and then got some, I think what at the time was intended to be helpful feedback that poets really don't make money. So I am in high school and going to college to produce. And so I might as well transfer my efforts to academic writing, which I did, to fair to middling to slight success. But I think about how my voice wasn't really infused in that. I enjoy academic writing, but it is sort of, I worked hard to decouple the person from that writing in some ways. And I think how over time, oh, thank you, Yodi. Over time, I've moved back to writing poetry, and that is much more from my voice. And I think about the social identities I talked about in the beginning really surface for me. Those of you who know me, I might use a $10 word in the same sentence I use fuck, because that is true for me. I grew up in a very non-respectable, gritty working class family that was blue collar. That was our experience. And it doesn't mean that just because I've had the fortune and privilege to kind of get to a place where I guess I'm middle class, also in education, that doesn't mean those have to be asunder. Those can be merged and blended and part of one voice.
Finding your voice there's lots of gifts this morning from everybody here. So finding your voice, I was thinking about how you asked, what was the question? When did you know? Or maybe it wasn't finding, but going back or something like that. But
yeah, I mean, the finding your voice presumes it was lost, right?
yeah,
So I was
exactly.
like
Yes,
curious
yes,
about that
yes,
presumption we had.
yes,
And okay, if you lost it, did you find, where'd you
yeah,
find it? Where was it?
yeah. One of the things that I think that, like, for all of us, we've probably, this resonates with us. I think that when we are born and when we are children, like, we have our voices, we develop our voices. And as we grow older, with like the socialization, the pressures, people's expectations based on whatever they see us as, then I think, I don't know if it's like this, same thing. It's like this shell comes on us, right? That's like our true us, our true essence, our true selves. We're still there, but we have to like take those layers off that get built up over the years. And so I think it's the same thing with our voices. I love listening to my daughters when she was, 1 and 2. I recorded her along the way, and I just love listening to, her voice and like how she is, um, herself now, right? And so I feel like I now at this age am the most like I was when I was, 4 and 5 and 6. And that's my authentic voice. I had to work to like regain that, right? And so many of us probably can relate to that, like going back to being that baby, that child, like playing. I think that helps us to recapture our voice, that has been lost along the way.
Dawn, thank you. When I say you put that so eloquently, so very eloquently, because that's what I was itching to say before I forgot. But it's so very, very true, because when I think about when I was the closest to what I would say my authentic self, it's definitely before I hit probably 4th or 5th grade, because that's when others' opinions of me really started to make me feel. I remember when I was going here, and I got sent here from an all Black school. I used to go to primary school until like 2nd grade, and I remember coming to this school, which at that time was all white, and it wasn't. We weren't well received at that time, right? And so I remember. But I had a small group of girls who really embraced me, and they made me feel comfortable being my full self in their presence, because a lot of times people that looked like me used to say I talked white, right? And I started hearing that when I was like in maybe probably about 3rd grade. And so I was at this school, and that stuck with me, because just like one of my missions is to plant seeds of possibilities in our children. You can also plant seeds of doubt in children, and it takes root, and it can blossom into really ugly things. And you see it so early, especially with social media and TikTok. They get exposed to it, it gets watered, and it flourishes like wildfire, right? And so I remember probably the most authentic Kallista was probably in 1st grade, 2nd grade. That's the Kallista that wallowed around in joy, that knew she was loved, that loved to play, did not stop and think about everything she was going to say and rethink about it before she opened, because she didn't feel like she was going to be judged. And now at 54, I just turned 54 this year, I am the closest to her. And it feels amazing. And you just want to protect her until she gets strong enough to protect herself, right? And I literally walk around in this protective mode, like, girl, I got you, because we've been separated for too long. And so that voice also is I'm like in protective mode, and I'm like, I'm not trying to like distance myself, or I ain't trying to make nobody mad, but this girl right here, we've been distant for too long, and I gotta protect her. Like, baby, I got you.
Come on, say pause.
Amen. Amen.
Come on. You said we've been separated for too long.
For far too long.
We've been separated for far too long.
And you feel it. You feel that you've been separated, because when she shows back up, you're so happy to see her. And you don't want to associate with anybody that's not going to be in her presence.
There you go.
I'm no longer wanting to be in people's presence that they like, why are you so this, and why you be acting like that, and why? I love her, and I missed her. I didn't even know how much I missed her until she showed back up. I can't do it no more, y'all. I can't. People leaving here too quickly. I can't. Like, me and her, we like this. We like, I got to protect her space. Like people got bodyguards, and they be moving people out the way when they bring the. That's how I feel like I'm doing her. Don't touch her. Don't touch her.
Mm.
All right, so I just have to offer that I'm just struck by the common threads that we're finding here. Like I feel I too have become much more acquainted with little Hamida in the past 2 years.
Mhm.
And I will offer that little Hamida had her own flavor. I'm not the biggest fan of Robert Greene. I'm not a supervillain. But one of his quotations that comes to mind, and this is going to be an awful paraphrase, is that society offers dominant narratives for us to follow, but the pieces of us that are most us are the most peculiar pieces. And y'all, I was that 5-year-old who was really into ancient Egyptian archaeology, and I would make cardboard sarcophagi. That's a casket out of concrete, y'all. As a kid, and I'm like excited to show it up to my mom. And looking back, I'm like, this 43-year-old woman pretended to be excited about this weird ass thing this kid was doing. But that has always been me. But Kallista, when you were talking about that little girl, like little Hamida tried to conform and think about what other voices are saying, and I should join this chorus. And in the last year and a half, I've just been like, well, fuck it, we're different. We march to the beat of our own drum. We write differently, we think differently. And that's just what it is. And I think, Dawn, to your earlier point, it's not that hard because there's nothing else that I want to do more.
Mhm.
I mean, I want to be that grown up that little Hamida needed and wanted and hoped for. So I'm just glad we write and we also are becoming friends with our inner children.
Mhm.
Mm. Ooh. I'm like tingly in my body. I feel giddy. Each of you. I I've been thinking a lot about what each of you has said as I reconnect with little Yodi too, right? And um, I've been reading and writing in this journal from this author, Glennon Doyle, this book,
Mhm.
Untamed. And at the holidays, I shared copies with people. And she talks about in the book, the untamed, like she uses the metaphor of like the tiger at the zoo. And, you know, we all love being entertained by that tiger in the cage, right? And that tiger has been trained to behave a certain way. Um, and but if you know, in the right circumstances, that tiger is still untamed, right? It is a wild animal. And so one of the prompts is like, when did you get tamed? And two things, since we've talked about honoring our inner voice, I just need to say out loud because it came on my spirit that while our stories today have primarily been about being nourished in the spaces where we grew up as little people, that for a lot more people, that is not the case, right? That they grew like the very first person who caused them to hide their truest self was the person whose charge was to care for them. And, um, you know, I think about so I just wanted to say that out loud, just to acknowledge that we may have had, you know, Dawn, you said like we may have had our basic needs met and not had our emotional needs met at home, you know, some of us. So I really, I wanted to mention that. But the other thing that each of you touched on in your own way was like this what feels like this turning from what the world says you are, whether that was in the fourth grade or it was in, you know, white supremacy, or it was in our gendered, you know, within the binary of our genders, right? Or someplace else, to this return that Kallista and Dawn and Hamida have described of, you know, these versions of yourself that were unfiltered and untamed. And I recognize you to be in practice, that this is a practice. So we often will offer like invitations to the participants of Centering Justice. And I was thinking about like what invitations would you have that you could maybe share through the stories of how you cultivate a practice of finding your voice? Is that question complete? Like, what could we glean from y'all from your practice? Because again, just as though finding infers loss, it also has this inference of like, there's a destination. Like, this is my voice. And I heard each of you say that in that shedding process, like it's more of an unfurling than it is a destination and a constant unfurling. If I heard you correct, then like, what is that practice of the shedding you talked about, Dawn? And what are the practices, Kallista, that you have, for cultivating your voice? Because I imagine it's not always out loud, right? Or on a platform like this. Would you mind sharing that with us as we begin to wind down the conversation?
Yeah, what I love to do, so I love crystals, right? I love crystals. And I remember going to a crystal store in Detroit, and it's like a psychedelic. I can't remember, it's changed since then, but it looks very psychedelic on the outside. And I remember going there and I met a young lady. And when I tell you, this lady read me and my son, who was in high school at that time, had us both in tears. And I think at that time, that was the beginning of my journey of really paying attention to how things felt in my body. And over time, I started taking baths, right? So part of what I do is just standing outside when there's moonlight and just grounding myself, just getting lost in the stars, letting everything just sort of sift in my head. And then just seeing how I feel, what thoughts come up, offering gratitude, being grateful for my ancestors. And that to me helped free me, and writing in my journal. And when you're drawn to something, pay attention to that. Pay attention to the things you're drawn to, whether it's places that you go, people that you feel led to speak into, TED Talks that you feel led to listen to. All of that is helping your voice gain information and find its value over and over and over again. And to me, it's a process. I don't think it ever ends as long as we're taking breath, but it's really important from my standpoint to pay attention to what you are naturally drawn to. And I don't think that that's taught enough in this country, but it's so vital because you're drawn to it for a reason. And I think, it's part of our purpose, and that purpose tied to your voice.
Okay, I'm gonna piggyback on Kallista again because I'm vibing with her, and this Kallista already really said this, but I'm just gonna say it another way. I mean, I think for me, what I would say to people is like, be your authentic self. Like, it's kind of interesting the way I think in our culture, we feel like, or we're taught to think that there's something wrong with us. And when you bring in race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, other things, then it sort of just multiplies those feelings maybe. But like, there's a Sherry Huber book. Some of you may be familiar with her. She has a book titled, she does like meditation practice and other things. And she has a book and it's titled, There Is Nothing Wrong with You. And I think when we try to be someone other than who we authentically are, that's when we are really feeling like there's something wrong with us. But if you just be who you authentically are, move in this world as you, like, that's when you're able to like find your truth, speak your truth, speak your voice, and just be centered in who you are. Like, just be who you are, embrace it. And a song comes to mind. There's a woman by the name of Laura Love, and she has this song called Let Your Freak Flag Fly. It might even just be Freak Flag, or but those are the words to it. Let your freak flag fly. And it's I just love that song, because that's basically what it says. Just like, be who you are, like embrace who you are, you know? So that's what I would say.
Don, I guess we're just piggybacking today. But I mean, be who you are. I think about, of all the facades I would put on, that is the shortest lasting thing for me, because ultimately we can only be who we are. We all go back to who we are. Or I go back to who I am. Like, I think earlier on in life, when I was more of a people pleaser, like dating Hamida was different than 3 months in sweatpants Hamida. And I'm like, that's actually not helpful for me or the other person. So I really appreciate that piece, Dawn, around just being yourself and doing yourself. I will offer that I have not always felt good in my voice. And 2 years ago in the winter, I gave myself a challenge to not refuse to do anything Hamida wanted to do. And I think about all the entrenched desire to produce and feel like I'm doing something useful, has and still is a tension between when I'm just being, when I'm just at rest, at peace, whatever. And during that time, I did many uncomfortable things in service to amplifying my voice. I realized there were some relationships I kept out of obligation. And it was very scary to call people and say, I actually don't want to connect with you, and I won't. Good luck, God bless. There were times when I just laid on the couch and read, and I was like, but you could be cleaning, you could be doing laundry, you could look at emails. And I had to actively resist that draw to produce, to do something that ultimately wasn't necessarily nourishing me, but made me feel like I was worthy within a structure of production. So I would offer, I was lucky to give myself a week to just do whatever the hell I wanted. But I would offer, ask folks, whatever time that you're able to, say yes to every single thing you want to do. All right, I'm not telling y'all to do illegal stuff and like crime and stuff. I'm not saying that. But if you just want to veg it on the couch, do that. Laundry is there, it'll be there later. If you want to have some alone time, think about what it means to protect your boundaries and honor you. And I often think about or receive feedback that folks say, do that self-care thing so you can like show up for other people. Yes, but also do that self-care thing so you can show up for you, so you can be a good you. But those are the things that most come to mind. And yes, Patricia, a day, an hour, whatever time period you can do of yes.
Kallista, you shared a story of a little one that was upset. And you asked, where do you feel that in your body? You said, I see your hands are clenched and I feel your heart beating fast. And I appreciated that so much, because part of finding my voice has been paying attention to what my body is telling me. Whether that's an intuitive response, like that's where I find God, is like in my belly, is in my throat, in my, I feel creation as an embodied experience, kind of like what you said. And often when I'm having that experience and I'm in that alignment, it's like that energy is moving through me, right? And I'm not as like stuck in my head, you know, or is this the right thing to say, or the right terminology, or the right, you know, or like how's somebody going to hear that? So I know when I'm not in alignment, when I'm experiencing it up here and not in, you know, and that's when my imposter syndrome, my doubt, my fear, my, you know, that's when those things are really triggered, when I'm like up there. So I just wanted to name that for me, and what I felt like I heard in you all was also, I wanted to explicitly name like the connection between your voice and your and the embodiment of your voice, right? Where you're at, and that the care there is like soul care, right? It's different than a bubble bath or a laying on the couch. It's nourishing that soul, right? Wow. Oh, I knew I needed this conversation, and I didn't know I needed this conversation. Sometimes words don't even seem like enough when you've been filled the way that I've been filled today. It is, I feel like a soul level response of somebody said a yes day. Like this whole experience has felt like yes, right? Thank you each. Carly generally closes us out with, I want to just remind folks that we are constantly seeking your insights on our sessions. We are constantly curious about what more we can learn and center our understanding of justice in. So if you would take a moment to share your reflections on the session. The other thing is, when you give us feedback, we share it back with the conversationalist, and so they get to feel your love too. So I will say thank you, because that's what I've been trained to do. I see your hand, Dawn. Go ahead. Oh, okay. I will say thank you just from like the ways that you made what started as a really difficult day lighter for me today. Thank you for being a boon to my spirit.
Thank you.
No, yeah, yeah. Carly, tell the people how to wrap us up, sis.
So before Carly wraps us up, can I just add one thing, a request, please? Thank you. So I wanted to ask all the folks who came here today, I put my email in the chat, and I would like to meet you all. So please, if anything that I said resonated and you're like, oh, I would love to have a conversation, let's have tea or something like that. I will say I am open to meeting with folks in public, but I am very COVID conscious. You know, I'm more on the careful side, but I will meet with people like, say, outside for tea or something like that. So if I would love to meet you guys. So my email's there in the chat. Please email me. Thank you.